Hello, Meg here from I Teach Stamping, and welcome to the Friday Flip. So the Friday Flip is where we take one project idea and we flip it into something different. So let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be our inspiration card. We're going to use a lot of the same elements, but completely flip it up to give it a different look and feel. So the first thing we're going to do is all of our big shot stuff. So we're going to start with our die cutting, and I'm going to be using the finishing touches Edgelito. I'll get my cutting plate on top, and we're cutting a strip of old olive that's going to be 3 1/4 by 1 inch, and I'm using my magnetic platform so that die is not moving all around on me. And when we finish, we're going to have this right here. When we peel it off, we're going to have all these little circles. So just take your paper piercer and start poking these out. All right, so we have that, and then we're ready to move on to our dry embossing. For our dry embossing, we're going to use a piece of Sahara sand that's going to be 4 1/2 by 3 1/4. And I'm using the Argyle embossing folder. And I've just changed up platform so I can do the dry embossing with the big shot. And then once we've got this and we have our fabulous texture, let's make sure it turned out awesome. And it did. Perfect. Now that we have all that done, we are ready to do our stamping. For our stamping, we're going to be using the Let Your Hair Down stamp set, and I'm going to be using this one right here. So we have text above and text below, and we're going to do a couple different things with that. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to start with a piece of Whisper White cardstock, 2 1/2 by 3 1/2, and then a strip that's going to be 1/2 inch by 4 1/4 inches. I've got 2 different ink pads, Old Olive, Blackberry, Bliss. We're going to start with the Blackberry Bliss and our stamp. Now, our stamp might look a little funky to you. What I did is I covered up those extra lines of text that I don't want, and I'm using Post-it tape. If you can't find Post-it tape, just use a Post-it note or Scotch tape or something that's going to cover that up for you. We're going to take it, we're going to ink it up in that Blackberry Bliss, and it's going to get all over that paper, and that's okay. And before we stamp, we're just going to remove that. Then I'm going to use my Stamp-A-Majig to make sure that I get perfect placement with that thank you. Want it right in the middle of that strip, and I want it straight. Bring in the Stamp-A-Majig, and before we stamp, we're going to give it the breath of life, and that warm, moist air from your mouth is going to re-moisten up that ink. That way you're not in a hurry to ink it up and then dash over to stamp. And we have our perfect thank you. Now, before we put it into the Old Olive ink, we're going to clean it, wash it, and dry it. Then we're going to bring our imaging sheet back in, and we're going to get our words lined up on this one. So I love using grid paper, especially with the stamp. See how you have the dotted lines here and the dotted lines on your grid paper? So it's real easy to get it nice and lined up. Scoot it over just a smidge. There we go. I love my Stamp-A-Majig. Ink it up this time in Old Olive ink. And stamp. There we go. All right, so now we're ready to do our cutting and our assembly. So I used some pinking shears, or I'm going to use some pinking shears. In the finishing touches, when you get this piece here, you also get a pinking shear edge, but for me it's easier to just use pinking shears themselves rather than extra die cutting, because this goes together remarkably fast. You just have to take an extra second and line it up when you scoot your scissors. Okay, so we're going to do this on both ends. Ta-da! See, that was fast. That was ridiculously fast. All right, below our words, we're going to attach that green that we die cut before, that Old Olive. We're just going to center it. So the green is not going to go all the way. That was the intended purpose. Let me get all this nonsense out of the way because we're done with it. And let's go ahead and bring in the base for our card. So our card base is going to be more of that Sahara sand, 5 1/2 by 8 1/2, scored at 4 1/4. And on top of it, we're going to put this piece here that we dry emboss, but we need to add our ribbon first. This is just a piece of Whisper White Organza ribbon. You can use whatever kind of ribbon you want. We're going to take this and wrap it around just in the center. It's just going to change up our texture a bit. Add a little pop to the card. We're going to drop this in place. This layer here is going to be our next one, and we're going to use dimensionals. Look at this, a fresh sheet of dimensionals. These are a rarity in my home. I use dimensionals on everything. And all over our house are these little white backings you get when you peel them off. Because this one's a little bit bigger, I'm going to go ahead and add one into the middle. So yeah, these things, they're everywhere. Everywhere. They stick to the bottom of your shoes. They get stuck in your hair. Not kidding. They're everywhere. Okay, we're going to take this. And we're going to put it in place here on our card. And then this one I should have done ahead of time, but we'll just make it work. I've got a teeny tiny little strip. And this is going to be Blackberry Bliss. And it's going to be that same width. When I've got really narrow strips, I prefer to actually leave them extra long on purpose. That way I'm sure to have it the right size on the finished card. So what I mean by that is, I'm going to take this little 1/8 inch strip and put it along here. And this way, if my cutter is off just a smidge, meaning I didn't line it up right, but I like to blame it on the cutter, then all I have to do is go back in with my scissors and snip, and it's going to be the perfect length every time. It's not going to be a little short, it's not going to be a little long. See, it's just right. Okay, now we're ready to do our bow and our linen thread. So I'm going to bring in the 10-second bow maker. And don't let me forget about this one here. We're going to bring in some linen thread, and I've got it with one hole apart. I'm just going to tie a very simple bow. Get that nice and tied. And then, oh, haha, I grabbed the wrong piece. You would think that I would not make that mistake, but we all make mistakes, right? Okay, so we have this. You're going to pull it off and use liquid adhesive. I did it ahead of time, onto a silver button. When you do that, you're going to have this right here. So I just used liquid glue, but I wanted to have plenty of time for this to dry. We're going to put that in place, and now we're ready to deal with this piece right here. So I stuck it down initially using repositionable adhesive, so it didn't scoot on me while I was trying to stamp. I'm going to use my Hexagon Punch. Slide this in and just notch out this side, and then do the same on the other side. And now I'm going to use permanent adhesive. And we're just going to cover up that green thank you with our purple. Ta-da! And just like that, we have our card. So let's go ahead and bring in our inspiration piece and let's see what we did. So we kept the texture, and we kept the green border. We kept the strip, and we kept the little pop of color right here. So just a few changes, and I moved the button from the center over to the side. And there you have it. So I hope you enjoyed this week's Friday Flip. If you like this video, please be sure to like it below, and also be sure to share it with your friends. Then head on over to iteachstamping.com. Make sure that you're signed up for my mailing list so that you get all my exclusive content that I only share in my newsletters. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video tutorial. Have a great day.